Hey, folks, it's your buddy Mike Messier here with just getting my day started. My hair is doing its own thing and talking some pro wrestling and specifically AEW. And I guess I'll just go ahead and do my NWA thoughts from last weekend. Things happen so fast, it's hard to stay in touch with all these things. And as you know, I'm also a big movie fan. I go to the movie theater quite a bit. I went last night to see a movie. I did a review on the channel here of the new Barbarian horror film. So I put up a bunch of film reviews last night, which you can watch on the channel. Barbarian, Jaws 3D, The Invitation, and Honk for Jesus, Save Your Soul, were the movies I put up last night, my reviews of those movies. Let's talk about this AEW stuff. If you guys are seeing the notice and you want to chime in, you're more than welcome to share your comments. I might have a special guest, my buddy Shane McKenna, who's in Chicago, maybe checking in, maybe not. He always likes to keep me in suspense. But let's discuss the ramifications last night of AEW Dynamite. Interesting. I believe it was, I think it was Conan on Keeping It 100 was talking about how a young Tony Khan used to play one of these pro wrestling games like fantasy role playing manager games, and he had like his own little show called Dynamite, and this is like 20-25 years ago. So if that's the way that he came up with the name of Dynamite for wrestling on Wednesday nights on TBS and TNT, that's pretty interesting somewhat. But let's get into this thing. So basically the show last night, I did not watch live. I went to the film, as I said. I came home. I was very intelligent. I did not put on my phone. I did not check the computer. I knew that all the people in the internet wrestling asshole world would spoil it for me. So I went strictly to the television, put on Sling, put on AEW Dynamite. Show starts off strong. With basically cut to Tony Khan in a pre-recorded interview. Now, I think this is pretty meme-worthy. I think that the people out there could actually get some good screenshots, some frozen images of Tony's face. He looked pretty nuts at times. Like there was, I mean, the guy's under a lot of stress, and he's kind of an interesting-looking guy in the first place. So you could definitely screenshot or freeze frame Tony with some interesting visual images of his face. But basically, his announcement I thought was good. I mean, he did not get into the details of why that CM Punk was being stripped of the title. He didn't even kayfabe it and say it was because of an injury. Instead, he just went right into it and said that the title's been vacated and that the six-man trios title is also vacated, and didn't go into any particulars, any talk of suspension, didn't talk about any backstage fights. It was kind of like assuming that the viewer knew. I mean, people always talk about these supposed casual wrestling fans that are out there, which I don't think there are any left, to be honest with you. I think anybody with the internet probably saw the reports. If they even have a mild interest or a mild computer history of watching AEW or looking up AEW stuff, they were probably bombarded with things, on Monday and Tuesday and Wednesday about CM Punk and the fight and everything like that. So I don't think many people probably escaped finding out the backstage stuff before Wednesday night. So I do kind of appreciate from a legal standpoint, if Tony didn't want to get into it because of whatever legalities might be down the road, he just kind of brushed it off and just said it's vacant and we're going to do these tournaments, and for the six-man title we're going to have this match. I thought that was pretty smart. I think it was back to wrestling. I think this is one of the things. I mean, Eric Bischoff and maybe others were speculating, could they somehow maneuver this into a work that becomes a shoot, or a shoot that becomes a work, more so to say, basically meaning could they take this real life heat and frustration with all these egomaniacal wrestlers and turn it into a storyline. And I guess the match would be that I came up with would be Kenny Omega and the Young Bucks and Adam Page against CM Punk, Ace Steel, and FTR, 8-man elimination match. And would be a great match, but I think that we've learned if Ace Steel is going around biting people and they're throwing chairs in people's eyes and stuff, they're probably not going to be able to work together for a traditional choreographed wrestling match. It's just not going to work. So vacating the titles. And here's the thing, for people that have been bitching about, well, AEW has too many talent. What are they going to do with all these people? Well, this is kind of why. If you have this crisis, this situation, your roster there in AEW is so deep. You've got your Daniel Bryan. You've got your Hangman Page lost, which seemed to make sense too, just because his promo from 3 or 4 months ago was kind of the catalyst in a way for all this stuff. So I mean, it's good that Hangman put over, Daniel Bryan or Bryan Danielson. Bryan will fight Chris Jericho next week. Continues that storyline. And then you had Daniel Garcia, not to be outdone. He wins a title last night, which was probably good timing for that ROH Pure Wrestling Championship. And then on the other side of the bracket, you've got this thing we've seen before, Darby Allin and Sammy Guevara, two of the 4 pillars of AEW, supposedly. They'll be fighting, and then the winner of that fights. Who do they fight? They don't fight. They don't fight Jericho. They fight Moxley. So and speaking of which, Moxley, who's kind of in the same spot he was a few months ago, as far as getting a bye into this championship tournament, it's interesting to see Jon Moxley. He had a great promo last night. I mean, there's some people that are just never going to like Jon Moxley, and he's not my favorite, but I do respect him, and I do like what he's doing. And, with this promo, I think he showed true emotion, and at least he, presented as such that he actually cares about this AEW title and cares about the promotion. And he has been there since the beginning. If you think about it, he wasn't at All In, the predecessor to All Out, but he was, when they started the actual promotion, Moxley was there from the beginning pretty much. So I think he had a right to say what he said. Of course, not to be outdone. MJF came out before that, worked the crowd into a frenzy, was kind of playing the baby face. And then when Moxley came out, he went back to heel. I think this might be a thing that's kind of interesting. I think a lot of people were hoping, for whatever reason, that MJF was going to be a Steve Austin of 1997 and be this badass renegade babyface with heel-like tendencies. But it just seems like we're going back to the same old chicken shit MJF. And that's fine. I mean, that's probably the role that he's more comfortable in. And I think if you're going to do a title campaign where Moxley the only people I don't think I see Jericho winning this tournament. I see it being either Moxley or Bryan Danielson. And then you have MJF taking on whoever wins that. So it'll be interesting. Now, will it come down to Moxley versus Danielson? Supposedly, they're both in this Blackpool Fighting Club, although they did have a match with each other shortly before that group with the pay-per-view they had several months ago. So who knows? But I think the point is this, folks. If you're a pro wrestling fan, especially if you're an AEW fan, how a promotion deals with crisis or crisis, it's an indication of whether or not you want to stick with this promotion. And for me, the way that they dealt with the Brody Lee unfortunate passing was what motivated me to start going to see their live shows at Daly's Place. Before that, I wasn't going to the Daly's Place live, but because of the way they handled the Brody Lee tribute show, the respect that they showed, the production of that show, the integrity, the way that they handled him being sick for a few weeks before he passed away, that kind of earned my respect from AEW, a year and a half ago, whatever it's been. And now with the way they're handling this, it's too bad that it had to get to this point with these vacated titles and this crazy press conference, but they've earned my respect, and Tony Khan, look, like I keep saying, he's the Richie Rich of pro wrestling. He plays with his human action figures, but is that anything different than McMahon or any Dixie Carter or anyone else? Not really. So, and he probably pays these guys more per match than anyone else. I mean, if you were a wrestler, you'd probably want to work for AEW because minute for minute, match for match, you're probably getting more money there than anywhere else. Probably in the history of United States wrestling. Maybe I'm wrong, but just seems like that. Not to say that these guys are getting the money that The Rock or Austin was getting in the late 90s. I'm just talking about per match, per appearance, per bump. These guys are doing pretty well. It was nice to see Penelope Ford last night. I think she's one of these talents. The Bunny, Penelope Ford. I think they've kind of gotten lost in the mix. I mean, they had that awesome hardcore women's match back at the end of the year, the turn of the year into 2022. I was there for that at Daly's Place. Those ladies can go. You know, the Bunny and Penelope Ford don't get a lot of TV time anymore. They've kind of been pushed aside, but it was nice to see Penelope Ford. To be honest, I think she should have won that match. I think this eliminator concept thing is another one of these things like the interim title thing I'm not a big fan of. I think they should have had Penelope win the match and let her get a title shot somewhere down the line. I don't see the harm in that. She looks fantastic. She wrestles pretty well. She's got a good gimmick. So there you have it. What else happened on the show? The trios was filled. The trios, you know, it's kind of like one, you know, two sets of champions already. The Death Triangle. I was kind of hoping the Best Friends would win. I thought it might be nice to see the Best Friends actually get some belts around their waists, but it wasn't their time apparently. And there does seem to be a hierarchy system in AEW, like everywhere else. And the Best Friends, for whatever reason, are pretty low on that totem pole. You know, they're like one step above the Parker Boudreaux group. Also interesting to see, and I am a big fan of the Death Triangle, especially the Lucha Brothers. So I'm glad to see them get something, although I don't like their little assistant guy. What else? The group with, what's the guy's name? Spudley Moxley or whatever, the Spudley Hardaway or whatever, the manager guy who's, I guess he's now with MJF, although that wasn't really represented last night. But they had Morrissey, and then it's the Ass Boys, and is it a private party guy? And is it Ethan Page? Is the whole Dan Lambert thing gone now? Is like the Men of the Year over? Because here's Ethan Page with these guys. So it just seems like another collection of kind of oddball mid-carders thrown together. And somehow they've got MJF associated with them somehow. So I'm not really sure. They beat up a cameraman or they beat up a production assistant. And it didn't do much for me. And for all the hype about this manager guy, I guess he's one of these NXT people. It doesn't do much for me. I mean, I'm just getting Clarence Mason vibes from this guy. He's not doing much for me, but maybe I'm wrong. Maybe he's such a great talker. He's probably not. He's probably just average like everybody else. So anyway, it was a good show. It was a fun show. The good wrestling. Bryan Danielson and Adam Page, probably the best match of the night. And then it ends with Garcia. You might make a case for that. Wheeler Yuta, who I do like Wheeler Yuta, but I'm looking at this guy and I'm thinking, is he really going to be someone that you could watch for 10 or 20 years? Like, I don't see him like, let's go Wheeler. I mean, that's a hard name to kind of get behind. No offense, but names are big, and I question, honestly, if Wheeler Yuta, what's a Wheeler? I mean, how do you represent that? Or how do you cheer for that? But he's a great wrestler, and maybe I'm wrong. If he was over at NXT WWE, they just call him Yuta. Now, I said I would talk about this NWA thing, but I'm not getting a whole lot of feedback right now, so maybe I'll hold off on that. But basically, it was a good 2-day show. Really a different feel for NWA. If you're watching the National Wrestling Alliance these days, it is like kind of a throwback, but it's not all nostalgia. There are some good things there. The women, I thought, were very good. The women's tag team title match and also Camille's match was very good. Trevor Murdoch, I'm not the biggest fan of, but I think that Trevor and Tyrus had a pretty good match. It seemed like a little bit of a Tyrus lost his mind at the end. I'm not sure how much of that was off the cuff or whatever, but I thought the NWA show was pretty fun to watch, and maybe I'll go back and do another analysis video of it in full. Subscribe to Mike Messier YouTube channel. I hope everyone's doing well. I'm recording this on Thursday morn. I've got a big day of doing stuff. I'm so excited. Just excited about my wonderful book. It's just so here. Distance from Avalon, When the Dying and the Dead Reunite. Just chatting with my friend, the cover artist, Nazar Germanoff. Everyone loves the cover. And you've got the back cover, which is me and a cat. So very exciting, folks. That's it. Goodbye. Subscribe to Mike Messier YouTube channel.